What if I told you the guy who turned 150 million Soviet citizens into shareholders also made a dozen man billionaires in the process, and by 1996, 40% of Russia's GDP was controlled by just a handful of them? This is the story of how one man, Anatoly Chubais, convinced President Boris Yeltsin to give away the Soviet Union. Not to the people, but to a few fast-moving bankers, mobsters, and insiders. And it all started with a little piece of paper, a voucher worth about a bottle of vodka. Stick around, because this is how you create an oligarchy in just a few years. By 1991, the Soviet Union was collapsing faster than a Lada in a snowstorm. Factories were idle, stores were empty, the ruble was worthless, and Gorbachev's reforms had opened the door just wide enough for chaos to walk in. Imagine standing in line for hours to buy bread, only to find the shelves empty. That was the daily reality for millions. After the USSR dissolved, the new Russian government under Boris Yeltsin faced the question: what do you do with 45,000 state-owned enterprises? Steel mills, oil fields, TV factories, even vodka distilleries. You can't run them all. And the state was broke. Enter Anatoly Chubais, a Western-educated economist with a vision and a PowerPoint probably. He proposed, don't sell the factories slowly. Don't keep them in the hands of corrupt bureaucrats. Give every Russian citizen a piece of the action. And so, voucher privatization was born. Every Russian citizen received a voucher. It looked like a high school diploma and was worth about 10,000 rubles. The pitch? Use your voucher to buy shares in a company. Become a mini capitalist. The problem was, well, no one explained how it worked. The stock market didn't exist. Inflation was eating everyone alive. So what did people do? Well, they sold their vouchers. But while ordinary Russians were offloading their vouchers, some men were playing chess with the entire economy. For cash, for groceries, for vodka. Sometimes for pennies on the dollar. Or kopecks on the ruble, I suppose. And some very smart or very connected people were buying. Before the ink was even dry on the vouchers, a new elite was already forming in the shadows. Ready? Well, let's meet the new class of overnight billionaires. Mikhail Khodorkovsky bought up vouchers through his bank Menatep, then acquired Yukos, a massive oil company. Once Russia's richest man, he later spent a decade in prison after clashing with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Potanin used his banking ties and ran the infamous loans for shares auctions, acquiring Norilsk nickel for a fraction of its value. Roman Abramovich, probably most known for his Chelsea FC ownership back then, partnered with Boris Berezovsky to grab Sibneft, another oil giant, for roughly $100 million. A few years later, it was worth billions. These weren't just smart business moves, they were insider deals. Auctions were rigged, valuations were fake, and the public had no idea what they had until it was gone. And through it all stood Anatoly Chubais. He called it a success. After all, 70% of Russians became shareholders. But in reality, a few oligarchs gained control over the country's most valuable assets. And once they did, they owned the media, the banks, and eventually the politicians. Take Boris Berezovsky, for example. He used his stake in Russia's largest TV network, ORT, to shape public opinion and back political candidates, including Yeltsin himself. With control over both messaging and money, the oligarchs became untouchable. So what happened to Chubais? Well, he stayed in government for years and headed the electric monopoly RAO UES. He became a hated public figure, and in 2022, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, he quietly left the country, some say for good. The man who engineered capitalism in Russia couldn't live in it anymore. To this day, voucher privatization is one of the most controversial economic reforms ever attempted. Supporters say it was necessary. The old Soviet state was dead. Something had to be done. And at least it wasn't taken back by communists. Critics, on the other hand, say it was legalized theft, that it destroyed trust in markets, that it set the stage for Putin's rise as he offered to tame the oligarchs in exchange for total power. But one thing is certain, It created a new elite almost overnight. And the rest of the country, well, they got paper and poverty. What if the vouchers had been protected? What if the state had created a real market with real oversight? So next time someone tells you the market solves everything, remember the time Russia gave away its economy and called it reform. At what cost? What do you think? Was Chubais a visionary, a villain, or just a guy who opened the floodgates too fast? Well, let me know in the comments. If you found this story intriguing, like this video, subscribe to Bits of Savvy, and hit the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. Well, thank you for watching, and remember, just because it's privatized, it doesn't mean it's fair. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, and this rhyme sounds a lot like modern wealth inequality. Like and subscribe for more hard-hitting stories the textbooks skipped.